The veil fluttered like smoke in the wind, thin as breath, the fabric trailing from her face as she stood silent in the doorway of the church. No one clapped. No one smiled. They just stared, some in pity, most in disgust. "You can't have her. She's too ugly," someone muttered loud enough for half the town to hear. But Levi Ward didn't flinch. He reached for her hand like he'd reached for a rifle 100 times before. Steady, sure, without a moment of hesitation. That's the part they'd all remember. Not the veil, not the silence, but the way he looked at her when the rest of them looked away. Let's go back. It was a dry spring that year, the kind that cracked the riverbeds and turned the hills into bone-colored memories of grass. Dust curled off the backs of cattle like breath off dying lungs. Buzzards rode the heat with wings barely twitching. Levi Ward rode alone, as he always had. 35, maybe 36. He wasn't sure anymore. Life on the edge of Blanco County didn't mark time by birthdays. Only by seasons. By scars. He wasn't the kind of man people remembered in detail. Just the tall one with the dog, or the war-sick one from Arkansas. A quiet rancher with a limp in his left leg and a habit of talking more to horses than to men. But people noticed when he spoke because it happened so rarely. That spring, folks in town whispered about the girl who /D come in on the night train. Covered head to toe in linen and silence. The preacher's wife had brought her out of pity, or guilt, or something halfway in between. She said the girl was an orphan from the southern borderlands. Disfigured, they murmured, though no one knew how. They didn't bother to learn her name. God wrapped her in a sack for a reason, one old man said through yellowed teeth. A mercy to the rest of us. But Levi watched from the dry goods store as she crossed the street that first day, head down, moving like she expected stones to be thrown. Nobody did. But no one waved either. He saw her again at the watering trough by the old cottonwood. She didn't speak, didn't look up, just refilled a cracked pitcher, her veil stained at the edge with dust and sweat. The wind lifted it for just a breath of a second. He saw enough. Not everything, but enough. Levi's ranch sat 12 miles outside town, tucked into a saddle of scrubland, mesquite, and boulders shaped like busted teeth. It wasn't much. A house made from borrowed wood. A barn with its door hanging crooked. A dog named Flint who didn't bark unless it mattered. The night he saw her standing in the rain behind the church, soaked to the skin and shivering, something in him gave way like old wood underfoot. She didn't beg, didn't ask, just stared at the ground with her shoulders folded inward, like she was trying to vanish into herself. "You got a place to go?" Levi asked, voice low. She shook her head. He offered his hand. She looked at it for a long time before she took it. Folks said he'd lost his mind. Took in the veiled girl. Let her live out on the ranch. Alone. With him. Must be desperate, one woman spat. Must be blind, said another. He didn't argue. Didn't explain. What was there to say? She never showed her face. Not fully. But she worked quietly, diligently, mending, feeding, cleaning. She knew the land better than most white folks did. Spoke to the animals in a dialect even Flint seemed to understand. And sometimes, when the wind was high and the world fell still, Levi caught her singing. Soft. Something without words. Something that sounded older than the hills. He never asked her what had happened to her face. Never needed to. The scars a person carried weren't always visible. Spring turned to summer. Dust thickened. Tension did too. When Levi rode into town that morning, he didn't expect to find the sheriff waiting on the porch of the saloon with his arms folded and a look like sour milk. "We need to talk." Levi tipped his hat, dismounted slow. "Then talk. It ain't right what you're doing, Levi. Folks are concerned." "About what?" "About you. About her. Ain't normal, man and woman living out there like that. Her being what she is." "What is she?" The sheriff looked away. "She's veiled. Ain't ever shown her face. Don't talk to no one. Don't even know where she's from. For all we know, she's Apache or worse." Levi's voice stayed flat. "She's not worse. Then let folks see her. She doesn't owe anyone that." Silence swelled between them like a storm cloud. You aim to marry her? The sheriff asked finally, half mock, half warning. Levi looked toward the chapel across the road, where the old bell still hung but hadn't rung in years. Maybe I do. The sheriff stared, eyes narrowing. People won't like it. I've never cared much for people. And with that, Levi climbed back on his horse and rode off, leaving the sheriff chewing on dust and doubt. That evening, back at the ranch, he told her, I want to marry you, he said simply. She didn't answer right away, just looked at him through that thin layer of linen, the wind pressing it soft against the outline of her cheek. Then softly, so softly he barely heard it, she whispered, Why? He shrugged, jaw tight. Because I see you, that's all. She turned away, and for the first time in weeks she cried. Not loud, not broken, just quiet, exhausted tears that ran down beneath the veil and fell into the dirt. Levi didn't touch her, didn't move, just waited. When she finally nodded, he nodded too. The next morning, he rode into town and bought a simple ring. By nightfall, the chapel lanterns were lit, and the whispers had already begun. They gathered outside the chapel like wolves on the edge of firelight. Not close enough to burn, but close enough to watch. A few came out of obligation. Most came out of curiosity. None came out of kindness. A woman like her wasn't supposed to be touched, much less married. Not veiled, not foreign, not strange. And certainly not to someone like Levi Ward, a man whose silence once made him invisible now turned him into a target. Inside the chapel, the room felt colder than the wind outside. The wood pews creaked with shifting weight and judgment. The preacher stood stiff as an iron rod behind the altar, palms sweating against his Bible. He hadn't asked for this wedding, but Levi had paid in full and looked him in the eye. That was enough. She entered quietly, with her veil falling low and her hands folded. No father, no music, no procession, and no one stood for her. She didn't flinch, not once. The ceremony lasted 5 minutes, maybe less. Levi's voice didn't tremble. Hers, though soft, was steady. She said, I do, like a vow already kept long ago. When it was over, the preacher cleared his throat, looked toward Levi, and hesitated. You may lift the veil. But Levi didn't. Not then. He only touched her hand and led her down the aisle, past the tight mouths and half-averted eyes of a town already sharpening its teeth. Outside, someone spit near his boot. She'll curse your land, the voice said. You mark me. She already healed it, Levi said, without turning. They walked away. Back at the ranch, the wind smelled like rain for the first time in weeks. Levi had strung up a row of wildflowers by the porch, bent and bound by wire. She paused beneath them. You didn't lift the veil, she said. I will, he said gently. When you want me to. That night they didn't share a bed, just a porch. He poured her tea from the good kettle, the one he'd never used for company. They sat in silence, watching the stars blink between drifting clouds. You think they'll come? She asked. I think they already have, he said. She nodded slowly. Then she took off the ring and placed it in his palm. You should leave me, she whispered. They'll come harder now. The men in town. Maybe worse. Levi didn't answer. He just curled his fingers around the ring and closed his hand. The next day, trouble came. It started with the sheriff. Not in uniform, just a man with a jaw clenched so tight it could cut steel. He rode up to Levi's fence line, dismounted, and didn't wait for an invitation. Flint didn't bark, but he didn't wag either. Just stood between the two men, ears high. She's got folks riled up, the sheriff said. Won't buy from your cattle no more. Blacksmith won't shoe your horses. Hardware store says you're banned. Levi leaned on the gatepost. You here to make it law? I'm here to warn you. About what? About what happens when a man brings a woman into town who ain't right. She don't talk. Don't take off that damn cloth. Ain't seen her face once. You think that's not making folks nervous? She's my wife. That don't matter. It does to me. The sheriff looked past Levi toward the house. She was out by the water barrel, head down, sleeves rolled. A wide-brimmed hat covered her veil. Her hands moved with quiet, practiced grace, lifting water, feeding hens. She hurt no one, Levi said. Fed the sick dog. Dug out your nephew's horse when it got caught in a fence line. You never even thanked her. She makes folks uncomfortable, the sheriff muttered. So do you, Levi said and walked away. The isolation came quickly. Neighbors stopped waving from wagons. Mail stopped being delivered. A boy who used to fish near the edge of Levi's property was told not to go near the cursed place. One evening, an oil rag soaked in kerosene was thrown at the barn. It didn't catch thanks to the damp hay. Levi found it smoking and still warm. She said nothing when he brought it inside. Just poured water over his scraped hand and wrapped it tight with linen from her own veil. Later, in the dark, she finally spoke. You should have left me behind at the chapel. I didn't marry you to win anyone's favor. Then why? He thought for a long time. You were the only one who didn't look away from me, he said. She went still, then reached up and pulled the veil back halfway. He looked at her and didn't blink. The next morning, a group of men came to the ranch. 5 riders, all from town, none with smiles. They didn't knock, just waited by the fence like they owned the dirt beneath them. One had a rifle resting on the saddle horn. The others had that look, the one men wear when they've already decided something, and it's just a matter of how much blood it'll cost. Levi stepped outside, slow and even. Flint followed, silent. She ain't welcome here, said the lead man. Gus Hemley, butcher by trade, bully by temperament. She's my wife, Levi said calmly. We don't care what the preacher says. We don't care what paper you filed. You bring something like that into this town, you better be ready for what comes. You got business with me? Levi asked. You're being told. Plain. Take her away. Before worse comes. Levi didn't speak for a long moment. Just scanned the horizon behind them, wide, empty land under bruised sky. Then, I won't run. Then you'll burn. The riders turned and left, spitting dust behind them. Levi watched until they disappeared. Then he looked toward the barn. Smoke. Not from a pipe. Not from a chimney. It was coming from behind the hayloft, curling black and low. And the wind was shifting toward the house. The fire caught like it had been waiting for a reason. By the time Levi reached the barn, the corner beams were already lit through, flame crawling up the drywood like a serpent tasting blood. The horses inside thrashed, their cries sharp with panic. Smoke poured out of the cracks and seams. He didn't shout, just moved. Axe from the porch, rope from the rail. He kicked the side door open with his boot and vanished inside. She came running from the field, skirts hitched, veil fluttering behind her. Flint barked for the first time in days, circling her, tugging at her sleeve like he wanted her to stay back. She didn't. She grabbed a bucket from the well and filled it quick, then another, hauling water to the edge of the blaze. But it was useless now, not against this. This wasn't an accident. Someone had soaked the back wall in turpentine. By the time Levi came stumbling out with 2 horses coughing behind him, the whole front side was ablaze. His shirt was black with soot, blood along his forearm, eyes squinting from smoke. He looked at her, or at least, at the shape of her through the shimmering heat. They're done warning, he said. She dropped the bucket. I'll pack, she whispered, but he shook his head. No, there's no other way. There's one. He turned back to the porch and grabbed the Henry rifle from the post. He checked the chamber, worked the lever once. I won't run, he said again. By nightfall, the sky was filled with smoke not from their barn, but from fires further down the valley. Signal fires. Not from town. From the canyon rim. The dog whined low. She stood at the edge of the porch and looked south, toward the hills that once sheltered the Lapon Apache. Levi stepped beside her. You knew this might come, she said. He nodded. You don't know what I am, she said softly. I don't care. They'll come. My people. They'll see the fire and think I'm in danger. They might think, you did this. I'll tell them the truth. She gave him a long look, quiet as a prayer. That may not be enough. The first sign was the owl. It passed over the house, too low for any natural bird, wings stretched wide in the shape of a warning. The next morning, footprints appeared on the hill near the fence. No horses, just moccasins. And then came the drums. Distant, rhythmic, slow. They pulsed through the soil like a second heartbeat. Levi stood outside sharpening his knife. He didn't say a word, just listened. "I know that rhythm," she said. "It's not war. Not yet. It's a question." "What kind of question?" "Who has me? And why?" That night she didn't sleep. She sat by the window, veil drawn, watching the horizon. The fire at the ridge burned until dawn. On the third day they arrived. No fanfare, no smoke, just figures on horseback stepping out of the early morning fog like ghosts returning to claim what was once theirs. There were 5 riders at first, then 10, then more scattered behind them, walking, quiet, unblinking. The lead rider was an old man with hair as white as cotton, braided in thick cords, riding a horse blacker than pitch. He carried no weapon Levi could see, only a carved staff and a necklace of small bones. Flint barked once, then backed into the house. She stepped outside alone. She didn't speak. She just stood at the gate. The old man looked at her, then passed her to Levi, then back again. He said something in a low voice, a tongue Levi didn't know. She answered with the same. The exchange lasted no more than 30 seconds. Then the old man turned to Levi. "When a man marries a woman without knowing her name, he is either a fool or a prophet." Levi gave the smallest shrug. "I don't claim either." "You burned your own barn?" "No." "You lie." "No." The old man watched him with the stillness of a hawk perched on a branch. Then he nodded once. "Then she may choose." "Choose what?" Levi asked. "To stay, or to return." She looked at Levi. Her eyes were the only part of her face he'd truly come to know, and even those had been shaded by veil and dusk. But now they were wet, white, unafraid. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. The old man grunted. Then he must speak to them. "To who?" Levi asked. The old man pointed toward the tree line. "Not us. The ones who still remember the first wound." Levi felt the knot in his stomach harden. "What if they don't listen? Then they'll kill you." That evening, a fire was lit in the center of the field near the old corral. She laid out 4 stones. Levi stood beside her. The air felt thick with watching eyes, though no one had approached since morning. Just before dusk they came. 2 riders on foot, faces painted, spears slung over shoulders. Not elders, not scouts, judges. Levi stepped forward. She reached out and touched his wrist. "Don't say anything proud. Don't try to be strong. Just be true." He nodded. The taller of the 2 men stepped forward, looked Levi up and down, then spoke in English, halting but clear. "You took what was not yours." Levi didn't flinch. "She chose me. You covered her in a white man's veil. She wore it before I knew her. You should have turned her away." "I couldn't." "Why?" "Because I've been alone too long." And she looked at me like I was still a man. Silence. The fire cracked. The second man stepped forward and pulled something from his bag. A feather, black-tipped. He placed it at Levi's feet. Then he looked at her. "He speaks like someone who's lost a brother." She knelt slowly and picked up the feather, then stood beside Levi, and for the first time, she whispered her true name. "Maya." The painted men stepped back. "Then he is not holding you." "No," she said. "He is holding me up." The next morning, the valley was silent. The Apache riders had vanished by sunrise, not retreating, not fleeing, just melting back into the folds of the land, as if the hills themselves had called them home. Only the feather remained, now tucked above the doorway of Levi's porch like a quiet covenant. Levi watched Maya from the window as she gathered eggs. No veil, just the braid of her hair hanging loose down her back. Her movements were unhurried, but not soft. She moved like someone who'd carried weight too long to believe in ease again. He stepped outside and joined her in the shade. "You told them your name," he said. "I told you first," she replied. He nodded, and a long silence passed between them, not uncomfortable, just full. Then he finally said, "You want me to say it?" She looked at him. "I don't need you to. I just need you to know it." "I do," he said. Her eyes welled up for a second, but she looked away. She crouched beside the chicken coop, reached into the straw, and pulled out another egg. "When I was a child," she said, "my mother told me a woman's face belongs to 3 people: her father, her husband, and her spirit. The rest of the world doesn't get to claim it." She paused. "But they tried anyway. The soldiers, the priest, even my own uncle when I ran north. Everyone had a reason for what they wanted from me, and none of it was ever mine." Levi crouched beside her. "You don't owe me anything." She smiled faintly. "That's the first kind thing anyone said to me in years." He brushed dirt from the edge of the coop, fingers slow. "I've never been married before," he said. "I was too quiet, too strange. After the war, I didn't think I deserved it. Most days I still don't." Maya tilted her head toward him. "You never asked what happened to my face. I figured you'd show me if you wanted me to know." She stared at him, then slowly reached behind her braid and undid the final clasp holding back the last curtain of her veil. What Levi saw made his breath hitch, not in shock, but in sorrow. Scars ran from her jawline to just beneath her left eye, puckered, uneven, a wound long healed but not forgotten. They traced the shape of a hand, fingers once burned into her skin, the imprint of violence. She looked at him then, braced for revulsion. It didn't come. He didn't look away. He reached up, slowly, deliberately, and touched her cheek. His thumb brushed over the scars like reading a story in a language only she had learned to live with. "You're beautiful," he said. "Don't lie." "I'm not. I just see different than they do." A long wind rolled through the dry grass, tugging at her braid. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out, one long note, high and cutting, echoing across the ridge. She leaned into his touch, just slightly. "When you look at me," she whispered, "I forget I was ever hidden." He kissed her, not out of urgency, not to claim, but just to offer something whole in return. A kiss that didn't ask for anything but presence. That evening, as the sun dipped low and poured gold across the scrubland, the two of them sat on the porch and watched the shadows grow long. Levi's bandaged hand rested over hers. Flint lay beside them, tail thumping once in peace. "I want to build again," Maya said. He looked at her. "A new barn, not just to replace what burned, but something stronger. Then we'll start tomorrow." She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know they'll come back. The town." She nodded. "They're not done. Not really. People don't let go of hate that easy." "I'm not asking them to." She raised an eyebrow. "Then what are you asking?" He was quiet for a moment. "Just for time. Time enough to show them who you are." Maya shook her head softly. "They already think they know. Then let them watch us prove they don't." The next week passed in a rhythm neither of them had known before. They worked side by side, dragging timbers from a collapsed line shack miles down the ravine. They built again, hammer by hammer, sunup to sundown. The barn rose slowly, stubbornly, creaked and moaned but held. They sanded it smooth together, and when Levi's hand slipped and splintered, Maya laughed and sucked the sliver out gently like a wife born to the land. At night they cooked over flame, corn mash, beans, coffee thick and black. They said little, just shared breath. The scars faded, not from her skin, but from her silence. One night, by the fire, Maya reached into the satchel she had arrived with, the same one she had never opened, and handed him a folded piece of cloth. Inside was a child's moccasin, worn, stitched with care. "I had a sister," she said. "We were taken together. She didn't make it. I kept this." Levi held the tiny shoe in his large hand, rough fingers gentle with grief. "I'm sorry," he said. "I tell her about you," Maya said, voice breaking. "When I pray." He looked at her, startled. "What do you say?" "That you didn't flinch." The following morning, The first boy from town crossed the fence. Barefoot, maybe 10. Curiosity bigger than fear. He didn't speak, just watched from behind the horse trough as Maya hammered a board into place. She looked up, saw him, smiled, didn't wave, didn't call, just handed him a small bundle of jerky wrapped in cloth and returned to her work. The boy took it, ran. That was how the change began. Not with speeches, not with forgiveness, but with a single shared bite of food. By week's end, the boy returned, with his sister, then with their uncle. Maya never wore the veil again. The barn stood tall by the second month, stronger than the one before, with thick crossbeams and stone footings dug deeper into the earth. Levi had carved a small eagle into one of the front panels, right above the doors. Maya had stitched a ribbon of red wool across the inside rafter where only light and dust would find it. Together, they called it finished the day the rains came. It wasn't much, not in the way townspeople measured things, but it held their tools, their grain, their hope. It held the sound of her voice humming low in the mornings, and it held the silence Levi had once called home, now replaced by something warmer. Word reached town that the barn was done, and still no one came, not to help, not to check in, until one did. Sheriff Alton appeared just after dusk, hat in hand, dust on his boots. He didn't come with a posse or a rifle or even an apology, just himself. One man crossing a field after hearing more stories than he could ignore. Maya saw him first and didn't flinch. She stood by the porch, wiping flour from her hands, her face bare in the orange haze of lantern light. Levi stepped out beside her. The sheriff stopped a few paces short, nodded once. "Ma'am," he said quietly. Maya gave the smallest nod back. "I came to see for myself," Alton said. "Been hearing things. About the barn. About the boy you fed." Levi waited. Alton looked up toward the feather nailed above the porch. Black-tipped, the symbol of peace that no one in town dared to ask about. "I was wrong," the sheriff said. No one spoke. He shifted uncomfortably. "You ever think about coming back into town?" he asked finally. "The store, the market. People might act different now, after what they've seen." "People don't change that fast," Levi said. "No," the sheriff agreed. "But sometimes they want to. They just don't know how." Maya stepped forward then. Her voice was calm, almost kind. "We're not waiting for a welcome. We have a home." Alton looked down at the ground, then back up. "If you ever need anything, we will," she said. "When it's time." He nodded once, then walked away. That was the last time he came. And it was enough. Seasons turned like pages. Spring bled into summer, then into another fall. The rains were better the next year, the soil richer. Maya planted squash and bitterroot. Levi fixed the east fence and trained a new colt that Flint liked to sleep beside. Some nights, they'd sit on the porch, feet bare, sipping coffee gone cold. The barn doors opened just enough to catch the breeze. She kept the moccasin on a shelf in the barn. Not hidden, not sacred, just there. A memory softened by time. One evening, as the sky burned gold and smoke from someone's supper drifted low over the hills, Maya handed Levi a folded piece of paper. He opened it slowly. It was a drawing, faint in charcoal, of her and Levi standing in front of the barn. Not as they were, but older, grayer. A child between them holding both their hands. He looked up. Maya smiled. "I was thinking, maybe one day." He reached for her hand, thumb brushing her palm. "Only if it's with you." She leaned in close, cheek to his shoulder, as the last of the sun slipped behind the ridge. Years later, they'd say the ranch never failed again. The land stayed fertile, the animals strong. They said Levi Ward got softer with age. Laughed more, cursed less, held his wife's hand in public without shame or fear. No one ever called her the veiled woman again. They called her Maya, the teacher who taught half-breed children to read under a cottonwood tree. The one who stitched medicine pouches for sick babies. The one who translated when the Comanche came to parley and no one else could understand. They called her the reason peace held in that valley longer than anywhere else. And if you asked Levi why he married her, he'd just smile, shake his head, and say, "Because she looked at me like I was still worth saving." Then he'd lean back in his chair, let the dog lie across his boots, and stare out at the barn, where the wind played against the red ribbon and the feather above the door never once blew down.